Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Consultus Chat. Today we're going to be discussing ESOS and in particular Phase 4 and how that links into a customer's wider net zero journey. I'm joined today by Steve Atkins. If you'd just like to introduce yourself and your role within the business.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Steve Atkins. I'm a Principal Consultant for Net Zero here at Consultus, having been with the business for 21 years. And my role is principally to help customers out with their transition into a net zero future.
Brilliant. As I mentioned at the start, initially talk around ESOS. We've just completed Phase 3. Yep. We're now entering Phase 4 of the ESOS scheme, and what's come with that is a few additional reporting requirements. Can you just talk us through a few of the changes to the scheme and what customers need to be aware of that's now at play?
Yep, certainly. You're quite right. ESOS Phase 3 is now done and dusted, having finished on the 5th of August this year. Our auditors, however, are ready to continue servicing our customers and to identify further energy savings for them. As we move into Phase 4 of the scheme, however, the government has attempted to give the scheme a little bit more teeth. As part of the ongoing requirements, on the 5th of December this year, the customer is expected to submit an action plan, which is based on the ESOS Phase 3 findings, but puts a little bit more flesh into exactly what the customer intends to do, when they intend to do it, and the anticipated energy savings that they're going to see from implementing those measures. Going forwards, there's also a new annual reporting requirement which has been introduced into ESOS. That is to report on the energy savings which are being implemented. So once the action plan is in place, the customer is expected to report each year as to how they're getting on and the size of the energy reductions that they're seeing on an annual basis. And those reports are due in on the 5th of December in 2025 and 2026 respectively, before ESOS Phase 4 finally ends on the 5th of December 2027 in its normal 4-year round. So the government has placed further requirements, trying to give ESOS a little bit more teeth in terms of making sure that customers implement something, implement the actions that are found to be viable across their estate.
Which I suppose really is a positive, because I know historically a criticism of the scheme has been that it's just an administration burden and people are paying money for something with no real action at the end of it. So are you in agreement this is a positive step?
It's absolutely a positive step, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. You're right that for many participants it was a box ticking exercise. But this is now an excellent opportunity for those responsible for the energy usage across a portfolio to actually present a case to their business. The action plan and the annual reporting has to be signed off by the board of directors. So this is a great opportunity to really get some momentum behind those initiatives and actually start to see the energy reductions, which the scheme's been promising since the outset, but which customers now have a real basis to deliver on.
And with the action plan in particular, what would you say are the key considerations for a client when pulling this together?
The action plan will largely be based on the findings of ESOS Phase 3. It doesn't have to be. It can be other energy saving measures that the customers identified through other measures. But the key considerations are to look at exactly how far you want to go with that action plan. Now, we would always recommend that a customer uses this great opportunity to put a full business case in front of their board of directors for some quite extensive measures. It's a great opportunity as a kind of one-off during the course of this phase to really get board approval, to sort out funding, to get the investment that's needed to reduce energy in a meaningful way. So our recommendation would be that customers don't look at half measures or, again, don't try to use this as just a means of compliance, but really kind of seize the nettle and grasp the opportunity.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is all driving towards net zero, which obviously we have the 2050 target at the moment. Some customers see that as being quite far away, but as our experience is telling us, it's coming around quickly and people really need to start doing things now rather than kicking the can down the road, to say. So how are you seeing that this now, ESOS having more teeth to it can link into the wider net zero plan of a business?
Actually works in two ways when you think about it. The government is The clear direction with ESOS anyway is towards, as I say, more teeth to the scheme. And it's actually a stated aim of the government that in the future the ESOS scheme should incorporate some form of decarbonisation plan, not just energy saving, which is, and they are slightly different things. But furthermore, the action plan should fit into a wider customer strategy. Again, those customers who really want to seize the opportunity should take the chance to build the energy saving measures that have been identified in ESOS into a full decarbonisation strategy. Whether that's an interim plan to reduce their scope 1 and 2 emissions over the coming 5 years, or but we would certainly recommend they go one step further than that and start to think about their scope 3 emissions as well. That's those from their supply chain and from upstream and downstream activities, and start to think about that 2050 date, which may seem a long way away, but it will come around pretty fast. And the measure, and in order to go through a full net zero plan, it does take a considerable amount of time and planning, and it's about getting the ducks in a row to do that now.
And for a customer that now has to do an action plan for ESOS, what's the approach that we're taking to help customers on that journey?
We see it very much as a consultation piece with the customer. So the customer has to submit an action plan, or at least make a submission to the Environment Agency with regards to what they intend to do. So we very much see it as a consultation piece with the customer to agree what that action plan looks like, exactly how far the customer wants to go, what kind of measures that they want to look at and include in their actual plan, and effectively plan it out on behalf of the customer. We'll also handle the submission to the ESOS system in time for the 5th of December deadline, and make sure that action plan is submitted in accordance with the deadlines. Likewise, with the ongoing reporting, we will monitor the energy consumption of the customer and make sure that the energy saving measures are having the desired effect. And again, we can take the overall responsibility for the submission of the data to the Environment Agency on the annual basis, and really take that headache away from the client with the admin burden of actually complying with the scheme.
And with the full scale net zero plan, we've seen customers take great strides in that. Many customers have really started to accelerate those plans, whether that be because they're wanting a competitive advantage or whether they're being forced to by their supply chain. But for those customers that are yet to really make great strides in that, why do you think that is? What are the challenges that they're seeing and that's stopping them from progressing?
Challenges are varied, and it does depend on a customer by customer basis, but often those who are at the very outset of their journey don't know where to start, and the net zero pathway is designed to take customers right through from that initial agreement. Those are the type of customers who really haven't set any dates for when they want to be net zero. They haven't thought about how they get there, and they really have no idea how to even begin the process and how to project plan around it. Some customers are more advanced. Some customers are already taking great strides towards it, and those customers, again, but they may have thought about it as a holistic strategy, but not necessarily so. And again, the net zero pathway gives a chance to draw all the threads together into a cohesive and coherent strategy that delivers net zero over the customer's ambition.
Sure. And obviously here at Consultus we've got the net zero pathway, as we call it. At what stage can a customer join that pathway? So as we've touched on those that haven't even started yet, but what about if a customer has done some of the early stages? Where else can we help customers?
It's designed for the customer to jump onto at any stage. So the process as it goes through is to identify the measures that the customer can take to transition to net zero. Now, it may be that some customers have already started to do bits and pieces around that, but don't have, as I say, a complete list of measures that are going to take them all the way to net zero. So it could be about identifying more that the customer can do. It could be that they're taking a piecemeal approach and that they're doing it year by year rather than as a cohesive strategy. And the beauty of the net zero pathway is that once you've done the business of getting the board on board with the process, really it stays in place until delivery. You've already got their consent to start saving the carbon, and one of the benefits that we see for customers wherever they are on the journey is that they've got a mandate from their company to continue the journey and to expand on their journey, to get it fully delivered in the timescales that they want.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's something that I see quite a lot is, depending on which stakeholder you're speaking to, they all want slightly different things out of this net zero journey, and the initial challenge is to align that business with the plan. Would you say that's quite common across the piece?
I mean, the first step in the net zero pathway is to align hearts and minds, and it really is about making sure that everybody within the company is pulling in the same direction. As you say, different stakeholders come to it with different intentions. They want different things out of it. So those responsible for energy usage just want to reduce their energy consumption across a site. That will affect an operations manager, a premises officer, whatever it may be. But I've had journeys which start with marketing, where customers want to steal a march on their competitors, or at least make sure they're aligned with their peers. The finance people are often involved because it usually involves spending money in some way, shape or form. We often see even HR people getting involved, because one of the key things that graduates these days identify as one of the key considerations when they go into the workplace is that they want to work for a company that has a sustainability target.
Yeah.
So the net zero pathway feeds into lots and lots of different areas of the business. And obviously the aims and ambitions of all of those people can be slightly different, but getting them all aligned and agreeing on a date and an ambition and how they get there and what they want to see out of the net zero pathway, whether that be anything from saving energy itself to looking at transport or cultural engagement with staff or whatever it may be. Every area of that business can draw something from the pathway, so we can keep everybody satisfied.
Yeah, and you've touched on a few of these already, but for those customers that have already set their pathway in place, what are the key benefits that you think they're now seeing compared to somebody that hasn't started or isn't as advanced?
Generally speaking, the biggest advantage that we're seeing is that customers with a cohesive strategy are able to shout about it from the rooftops. So, effectively, those who have stated their ambition are able to publicly state what that ambition is and how they're living up to it. So, a great advantage from that point of view. Those who haven't yet started will start to see limitations in the business that they're able to do. There is concerted pressure within the supply chain these days for more sustainability, and that trickles down through the supply chain. And many customers we're seeing are entering this journey because of the pressures of doing so. There is potential to lose business because we don't have this pathway in place. So there are lots and lots of different reasons why customers may want to do it, and there are different advantages in doing so. But the most important thing is really to be seen to be doing something and having a plan in place which you can point at, you can publish. They can go on the company website that will say this is how we're intending to prevent climate change.
And you've mentioned supply chain, and I've had conversations recently where borrowing money and people like the banks are putting pressures on customers to be able to prove their plans to get access to funds or get access to grants, for example. I mean, I know I've been speaking to some people in the sports world who receive grants and they're now being asked to provide details around their net zero pathway. Again, is that sort of all part of the bigger picture that the pressures are starting to close in?
It is indeed, yeah. I mean, increasingly investors are looking for green credentials before they're placing their money, and therefore, obviously, it's vitally important that customers look at that aspect to it as well. Look at their borrowing costs and how they fund their operations. Traditionally, net zero initiatives, the customer's mindset is that everything has to be funded at capex. However, and capex is difficult. You have to the convincing of a board of directors, the size of a capex budget for a year can be difficult to put in place. Which is why here at Consultus we decided that we need to look at different funding models and offer different options to the customer. Not every initiative has to be funded via a capex route. And as part of that net zero journey, not only do we look at the carbon saved and the energy saved and the potential benefits from that point of view, but we also put together a full financial model that shows when money is going to be needed, what the investment cycle looks like across the lifespan of that net zero pathway, and the different sources of funding which the customer may have available to them via systems that we've set up to ease the burden, not just the traditional capex route.
Yeah, no, a really valid point, because that is something that is quite commonplace in conversations that we're having. A lot of people out there want to be doing things. They know that they need to be doing things. They want to do things for some of the reasons that we've already mentioned, but actually they know that from a sustainability point of view, it has to be done. But it's just unlocking that money to be able to allow them to progress on their journey. So that's a really good point.
The other benefit that we generally see is that once a net zero pathway is put in place, the customer's able to more readily address the operational challenges of running a business versus the investment into net zero. So we understand that here at Consultus that running a business and keeping a business operational is imperative. It's imperative that you're able to run your business on a day-to-day basis, and that your buildings are heated adequately and the lighting is adequate, etc., etc. And those operational challenges sometimes butt against the net zero ambitions of the customer. So making decisions around what equipment to replace and when to do so, and we're able to advise on how that operational challenge meets net zero, so that the customer can make the best decision going forwards to address how to buy better going forwards.
Sure. And so, from your experience, you've been involved in most of the journeys that we've been doing with customers here. What would you say makes the perfect net zero pathway? When everything goes well, what needs to go well for it to run very smoothly?
Well, those customers who are starting the journey from the outset, the important thing is to align the strategy and make sure that everybody on board with what you're trying to achieve and when. It's important that the customer has a small group of people who are fully invested in the net zero pathway and what they're intending to do. So we always recommend putting together a working party, effectively of stakeholders within the organisation. Now, as I've said, generally speaking, the pathway starts with a broad range of stakeholders from across the entire business. But as the pathway proceeds, we find that the number of stakeholders who are needed does shrink slightly once you start to turn it away from the ambition and what's possible into the kind of project management and the implementation phase. But it's important that that group is empowered to make the right decisions when they need to make them, and that everybody is pulling in that same direction.
We've spoken a lot about the pathway and the strategy side to it. So almost your output being, we know what we need, what we want to do, what we need to do, and that's almost a paper exercise to a degree. What are the key next steps for a customer then?
Well, the net zero pathway, once presented to the board of directors, should hopefully be signed off and agreed by them. That is the ultimate plan of this, and the output of the net zero pathway as such is a C-suite ready report which can go to the board for their assent of exactly describing what you want to achieve and when. From that stage on, it's about the implementation of the plan. It turns into a project phase. The net zero pathway will identify what measures need to be done in which year, as I've said, and we can start to look at how those measures begin to get rolled out with the customer. So through the net implementation side of the business, of the Consultus sustainability business, we can then move into the commissioning phase for further feasibility studies, really get into the nitty gritty of what equipment exactly is sourced from where, what equipment is available, and we can start to look and turning it into a proper physical project on behalf of the customer, and start to see hopefully there's those carbon savings that they're after.
Yeah, and I suppose to almost finish up, what timescales should a customer expect to be able to say they come to us and they've not really started anything? What timescales are we working to for them to get a plan in place and then be able to move into that implementation phase?
If the customer's looking for an interim target for just their scope 1 or 2 emissions, you're looking at a period probably of 3 to 6 months. We can generally do. We can deliver the pathway in. It does depend upon obviously data availability, some of which comes from obviously suppliers out there, but some of which we do need to obtain for customers. But generally 3 to 6 months to get the pathway done from start to finish. When you broaden it out to scope 3, it becomes a slightly bigger beast, and clearly they're across the 15 categories that we have to collect data for in scope 3 emissions. That does take considerably longer, but generally speaking, you're looking at a 9 to 12 month engagement from the point where we start gathering data through to the board report and a full set of recommendations as to what the customer should do.
Yeah, so I suppose the key message really is if you haven't started, let's have a conversation and start plotting that journey. And if you have started, there's still probably elements of this pathway that you may well need some external support on. And it's a continuation. It's not just once you've done it once, you have to continue monitoring it and making sure you're on track and you're getting the ROI on any projects that you have actually invested in.
In exactly the same way as Consultus has always traditionally been an assistant to heads of procurement at businesses as an additional resource, we see ourselves very much as an additional resource to the sustainability champions within a customer as well. So we're here to be to offer advice, to offer further resource, and basically to make sure that the customer can deliver on their ambitions as they see it, and basically to help that customer transition to a net zero future.
Cool. Thank you.